I've already forgiven you, but I'll never forget.
The burner phone fell from Julia's purse like a smoking tool hitting marble. I stood there in our custom-built kitchen, watching my wife of 12 years scramble to grab it before I could see the screen. Too late. The message preview glowed bright. Can't wait to feel you again tonight. E. My coffee mug didn't break when it hit the granite countertop. It just sat there, as solid and unmoved as I suddenly felt inside. Nate, I can explain, Julia started, her perfectly manicured fingers clutching that cheap plastic phone like a lifeline. Can you? I asked, my voice steady despite the earthquake happening in my chest. Because from where I'm standing, it looks pretty self-explanatory. Julia Foster had always been beautiful in that high-maintenance way that turns heads at restaurants. Blonde highlights that cost more than most people's rent, yoga-toned body wrapped in designer athleisure, and a smile that could sell ice to Eskimos. She'd built a career in social media PR on that smile, and apparently she'd been using it for more than just client meetings. It's not what you think, she said, which is exactly what guilty people always say when it's precisely what you think. I picked up the phone she'd dropped. The lock screen showed 17 unread messages from E, Eric Duncan, her boss at Coastal Marketing Solutions. I'd met Eric at company parties, shaken his hand, laughed at his jokes about real estate development in our little beachside town of Sunset Cove. He was one of those guys who wore expensive watches and talked too loud, married to an ice-cold blonde named Marissa, who looked like she could cut glass with her cheekbones. How long? I asked. Julia's face crumpled in that practiced way she'd perfected during our marriage whenever she wanted something. Nate, please, it just happened. We were working late on the Morrison project, and how long? The silence stretched between us like a chasm. Outside our floor-to-ceiling windows, the Gulf of Mexico sparkled in the morning sun, same as it had every day for the 3 years since I designed and built this house. My masterpiece. Every beam calculated, every angle perfect, every detail crafted with the precision that made me one of the most sought-after structural engineers on the coast. 8 months, she whispered. 8 months. I did the math automatically, the way engineers do. 8 months ago was when Julia started her fitness journey that required her to leave the house at 5 a.m. 3 times a week. 8 months ago is when she suddenly became passionate about weekend team-building retreats that I was never invited to. 8 months ago was when she stopped reaching for me in bed and started falling asleep with her phone clutched in her hand. I see, I said, setting the phone down gently on the counter. And where exactly were you planning to take this relationship? Because last time I checked, Eric's still married to Marissa. Julia's tears had started in earnest now, and I felt nothing. That was the strangest part. I'd expected rage, heartbreak, the kind of explosive emotion you see in movies. Instead, I felt like I was watching someone else's life through bulletproof glass. We're in love, Nate. Real love. Not like, she gestured around our kitchen at the life I'd built for us. Not like this arrangement we have. Arrangement? 12 years of marriage, and she called it an arrangement. I walked to the coffee maker and poured myself a fresh cup, my hands steady. So what's the plan? You divorce me, Eric divorces Marissa, and you two ride off into the sunset with your real love. It's complicated. No, Julia. Engineering is complicated. Calculating load-bearing stress on a 40-story building is complicated. This is just selfish. She flinched, like I'd slapped her. Good. My phone buzzed with a text from my sister Sam, who lived up in Tampa, practicing family law. Still on for lunch Sunday? Margaritas and gossip as usual? I stared at the message, then at Julia, then at the burner phone, still glowing with Eric's promises. An idea began forming in my engineer's brain, precise and methodical. You know what, Julia? You're right, this arrangement isn't working. Hope flickered in her eyes. So I'll consider a lot of things. I picked up my keys from the counter. I'm going to work. When I get back tonight, I want you to think very carefully about what you really want. Because once you make that choice, there's no going back. I left her standing in our perfect kitchen in our perfect house, holding her perfect little secret. But as I drove toward my office, I wasn't thinking about heartbreak or betrayal. I was thinking about leverage, about pressure points, about how every structure has a weakness if you know where to look. And I was very good at finding weaknesses. My office at Foster Engineering occupied the top floor of a converted warehouse downtown. with windows that looked out over the marina where million-dollar yachts bobbed like toys. I'd built the business from nothing after leaving the Navy, using the discipline and precision I'd learned as a Seabee to become the go-to guy for high-end residential and commercial projects along the coast. Rob Martinez was waiting in my office when I arrived, feet up on my desk, reading through project specs for a new hotel development. Rob had been my partner in the Navy and my best friend for 15 years. After retiring from the force as a detective, he'd started a security consulting business that kept him busy installing alarm systems for paranoid millionaires. "You look like heck," he said without looking up from the blueprints. "Good morning to you, too." I dropped into my chair and fired up my computer. "What brings you by?" "Marissa Duncan called me last night, wants to upgrade her home security system, says she's worried about break-ins." Rob finally looked at me, his dark eyes sharp with cop instincts. "Funny thing is, she specifically asked if I knew any good private investigators." I kept my face neutral, but my fingers paused over the keyboard. "Is that so?" "Yeah, real funny coincidence, considering her husband works with your wife." Rob swung his feet down and leaned forward. "Want to tell me what's going on, Nate?" I could have lied. Should have, probably. But Rob had pulled me out of enough fires over the years to deserve the truth. I told him about the burner phone, about Julia's 8-month affair, about the choice I'd given her. Rob listened without interrupting, the way good cops do. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "So what are you thinking?" he asked. "I'm thinking that if Julia wants out of our arrangement, she should get exactly what she's asking for. No more, no less." "And Eric?" I pulled up Eric Duncan's company profile on my computer. Coastal Development Group had their fingers in half the major projects in Sunset Cove, from luxury condos to shopping centers. Eric's biophoto showed him grinning beside a massive crane, hard hat tilted at what he probably thought was a rakish angle. "Eric's been playing in my backyard," I said. "Time to see how he likes playing in mine." Rob raised an eyebrow. "That sounds ominous." "Not ominous. Strategic." I minimized Eric's profile and opened my project files. "I've got work to do, but first, I need you to do me a favor. Shoot." "When Marissa Duncan calls about that security upgrade, tell her you're booked solid for the next 2 weeks. But you know a guy who might be able to help her out sooner." "What guy?" I smiled, but for the first time all day. Me. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of phone calls and emails. I had 3 active projects that needed my attention, but I found myself distracted, my mind working through possibilities like a chess player considering moves. At lunch, I drove out to the Sunset Cove Country Club, where Eric's company was building a new clubhouse. The construction site buzzed with activity, workers in hard hats, the rumble of heavy machinery, the sharp crack of nail tools. I parked across the street and watched through binoculars as Eric strutted around the site in his $1,000 suit, pointing at things and looking important. My phone rang. "Julia." "Nate, we need to talk." "I'm listening. Not over the phone. Can you come home?" I checked my watch, 2:30. "I'll be there in 20 minutes." The drive home gave me time to think. Julia wasn't stupid. Manipulative, selfish, and apparently unfaithful, but not stupid. She'd had all morning to consider her options, maybe even call Eric to discuss strategy. Whatever she was about to tell me, she'd rehearsed it. I found her in the living room, sitting on the white leather couch we'd picked out together 3 years ago. She'd changed clothes since this morning, trading her workout gear for a flowing sundress that showed off her tan. Her makeup was perfect, her hair styled. She looked like she was dressed for a date. "I've made my decision," she said without preamble. I sat down across from her, noting the way she'd positioned herself in the afternoon light streaming through the windows. Even now she was thinking about her angles. "I'm listening." "I want a divorce." The words came out in a rush, like she'd been holding her breath. "I'm in love with Eric and I want to be with him." I nodded slowly. "Okay." She blinked, clearly expecting more of a reaction. "Okay?" "You said you wanted to make a choice. You've made it. I respect that." "You respect it?" "Julia, we've been married for 12 years. If you're not happy, if you've found someone who makes you happier than I do, then maybe this is for the best." She stared at me like I'd grown a second head. "I thought you'd be angry." I was angry. This morning when I found that phone, I was furious, but I've had time to think about it. I leaned back in my chair, keeping my voice calm and reasonable. If we're going to do this, we should do it right, clean and simple. What does that mean? It means we divide our assets fairly. You take what's yours, I take what's mine, and we both move on with our lives. Julia's eyes narrowed slightly. Here it comes, I thought. The thing is, Nate, it's not that simple. This house, your business. I've been part of building all of that. I deserve my fair share. And there it was, the real reason for the sundress and the perfect makeup. Julia wasn't just leaving me for Eric. She was planning to take half of everything I'd worked for in the process. You're absolutely right, I said. You deserve exactly what you've earned. She smiled, thinking she'd won. I'm glad you're being reasonable about this. Oh, I'm always reasonable. It's one of my best qualities. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the Gulf. There is one thing, though. What's that? I'll need to have the house appraised. For the divorce settlement. And my business, of course. We'll want to make sure everything's valued properly. Of course. It might take a few weeks to get everything sorted out. In the meantime, I think it would be best if you stayed somewhere else. To avoid any awkwardness. Julia's smile faltered. Where am I supposed to go? I turned back to face her. I'm sure Eric can help you figure something out. After all, you two are in love. For the first time since this conversation started, Julia looked uncertain. He's still married, Nate. It's complicated. Complicated. I repeated the word like it tasted bad. Seems to be your favorite word lately. Don't be like that. Like what? Honest? I walked back to my chair, but didn't sit down. Here's some honesty for you, Julia. I know this affair has been going on for 8 months. I know Eric's been telling you he's going to leave Marissa for you. And I know you've been planning this conversation all morning, probably with his help. Her face went pale. How could you possibly? Because I'm not an idiot. And because Eric Duncan isn't nearly as smart as he thinks he is. I picked up my keys from the coffee table. Pack whatever you need for a few days. I'll be at my sister's this weekend. When I get back Sunday night, I want you gone. Nate, wait. But I was already walking toward the door. Oh, and Julia, you might want to ask Eric about his wife's plans before you get too comfortable. I have a feeling Marissa Duncan isn't going to be as understanding about this as I am. I left her sitting in our perfect living room, in our perfect house, looking anything but perfect for the first time in years. Time to make some phone calls. Sam's apartment in Tampa smelled like coffee and legal documents. My sister had always been the organized one in the family. Where I built things, she dismantled them with surgical precision, usually in divorce court. At 35, she'd made partner at one of the city's most prestigious family law firms by being smarter and more ruthless than everyone else in the room. So let me get this straight, she said, pouring wine into 2 glasses the size of fish bowls. Julia's been screwing her boss for 8 months, and now she wants half of everything you've built? That's the summary, yes. And you told her you'd be reasonable about it? I told her she deserved exactly what she'd earned. Sam grinned, and I was reminded why opposing counsel usually tried to settle rather than face her in court. Oh, this is going to be fun. We were sitting on her balcony, watching the sun set over Tampa Bay. I'd driven up Friday afternoon after leaving Julia with her ultimatum, and spent the weekend filling Sam in on the details of my marriage's spectacular collapse. What do you know about Eric Duncan? She asked. Real estate developer, married to Marissa Duncan, who comes from old Florida money. His company does maybe $50 million a year in business, mostly high-end residential and commercial projects. Kids? No kids. They've been married about 10 years, from what I gather. Sam made notes on her legal pad. And Julia thinks he's going to leave his wife for her? That's what she's betting on. Poor stupid girl. Sam shook her head. Men like Eric Duncan don't leave wives like Marissa Duncan. They just collect mistresses until they get caught. About that, Rob mentioned that Marissa called him about upgrading her security system and asking about private investigators. Smart woman. She probably knows exactly what her husband's up to. Sam looked up from her notes. Have you talked to her? Not yet, but I'm planning to. Good. In my experience, the enemy of your enemy makes an excellent ally. She flipped to a fresh page. Now let's talk about protecting your assets. We spent the next 2 hours going through my finances with the thoroughness of an IRS audit. The house was in my name only, purchased before the marriage with money I'd saved during my Navy years. The business was a sole proprietorship, built entirely with my own capital and sweat equity. Julia had never been involved in the day-to-day operations, never contributed financially, never even shown much interest in what I did for a living. Florida's a no-fault state, Sam explained, but that doesn't mean she's entitled to half of everything. The house and the business are separate property, as long as you can prove they weren't commingled with marital assets. What about her PR work? She's been making good money. How good? I pulled up our joint bank account on my phone. She's been depositing about $8,000 a month. Into a joint account? Yeah. Sam made another note. We'll need to trace those deposits, make sure she's been reporting all her income. Sometimes people in her line of work get creative with their taxes. You think she's been hiding money? I think people who cheat on their spouses often cheat in other areas too. It's worth investigating. My phone buzzed with a text message. Julia. Nate, please call me. We need to talk about this like adults. I showed Sam the message. She snorted. Adults don't have 8-month affairs with their married bosses, she said. But go ahead and call her back. I want to hear what she has to say. I put the phone on speaker and dialed Julia's number. She answered on the first ring. Nate, thank God. I've been trying to reach you all weekend. I told you I'd be at Sam's. What do you need? I need to know what you meant about Marissa Duncan. Well, what plans? I looked at Sam, who was grinning like a shark. What plans are you referring to, Julia? You said I should ask Eric about his wife's plans. What did you mean? I meant that Marissa Duncan is a very wealthy woman who's been married to a serial cheater for 10 years. Women like that don't just sit around waiting for their husbands to come to their senses. Silence on the other end of the line. Julia, you still there? Eric says she doesn't know anything. Eric says a lot of things, apparently. The question is, how much of it is true? What's that supposed to mean? Sam held up her legal pad where she'd written, Ask about the money. It means that Eric Duncan has been promising you a lot of things over the past 8 months. That he's going to leave his wife, that you two are going to be together, that everything's going to work out perfectly. I paused, letting that sink in. But here's the thing, Julia. If Eric was really planning to leave Marissa, don't you think he would have done it by now? Before his wife started hiring private investigators? She's not, Julia's voice cut off abruptly. She's not what? Hiring investigators? How would you know that unless Eric told you? And how would Eric know unless she told him? More silence. Julia, I want you to think very carefully about your situation. You've left your husband for a man who's still married to someone else. You're planning to move in with him, but he hasn't actually asked his wife for a divorce yet. You're assuming he's going to take care of you financially, but you don't actually know what his assets look like or how they're structured. Eric loves me. I'm sure he does. The question is, does he love you enough to give up half of everything he owns? Because that's what divorce is going to cost him. Sam was nodding approvingly. She'd taught me well over the years. I have to go, Julia said finally. One more thing, I said. I'll have movers come by Wednesday to get my clothes and personal items. After that, you're welcome to stay in the house until we get everything sorted out legally. But Julia? What? You might want to start looking for your own place, just in case things with Eric don't work out the way you're planning. I hung up and looked at Sam. How was that? Not bad for an amateur. You planted the seeds of doubt without being overtly threatening. Now let's see if she's smart enough to water them. And if she's not? Sam's grin turned predatory. Then we moved to Plan B. Monday morning brought rain and a phone call from Marissa Duncan. Mr. Foster, this is Marissa Duncan. I believe we met at the Coastal Marketing holiday party last year. I remembered her, tall, elegant, with the kind of bone structure that suggested good breeding and expensive orthodontia. She'd been polite but distant, the way wealthy women often are with people they consider beneath their social station. Mrs. Duncan, what can I do for you? I understand you do security consulting work. I'm interested in upgrading my home security system. Rob had done his job well. I do some consulting, yes. When would be convenient for you? This afternoon, if possible. Say 2 o'clock? The Duncan house sat on 3 acres of the prime waterfront property in Sunset Cove's most exclusive neighborhood. It was a Mediterranean-style mansion with a circular driveway, perfectly manicured landscaping, and the kind of casual elegance that costs serious money to maintain. Marissa met me at the front door wearing white linen pants and a silk blouse that probably cost more than most people's car payments. Up close, she was even more striking than I remembered. Ice blue eyes, platinum blonde hair pulled back in a perfect chignon, and the kind of understated jewelry that whispered rather than shouted about wealth. Thank you for coming on such short notice, she said, leading me through a foyer that could have housed a small family. Not a problem. Rob Martinez spoke very highly of you. Rob's a good man, very discreet. She glanced at me sideways as we walked through the house. I assume he mentioned that I was asking about private investigators as well? He might have mentioned that, yes. We ended up in a sunroom that overlooked the Gulf with floor-to-ceiling windows and enough tropical plants to stock a nursery. Marissa poured iced tea from a crystal pitcher and settled into a wicker chair that probably cost more than my first car. Mr. Foster, I'm going to be direct with you because I believe we have something in common. What's that? Unfaithful spouses. I sipped my tea and waited. In my experience, people who wanted to be direct usually needed a moment to work up to it. My husband has been having an affair with your wife for approximately 8 months, she continued. I assume you're aware of this? I became aware of it recently, yes. And how are you handling the situation? I've asked Julia for a divorce. Marissa nodded approvingly. Sensible. I assume she's planning to move in with Eric? That seems to be the plan. Marissa set down her tea glass and looked out at the water. Eric has had affairs before, Mr. Foster. 3 that I know of, possibly more. They usually last about 6 months before he gets bored and moves on to someone new. Your wife seems to think this one is different. They always think that. Marissa's smile was sharp as broken glass. The difference is that this time, Eric seems to believe it too. He's actually talking about leaving me. And how do you feel about that? Relieved, mostly. I've been planning to divorce Eric for 2 years now. The only thing that's been holding me back is timing. She stood up and walked to the windows, her reflection ghost-like in the glass. My father built a real estate empire in South Florida. When he died 5 years ago, he left everything to me. Properties, businesses, investments worth approximately $200 million. Eric has been managing some of those assets for me, which has been convenient for both of us. But now I'm ready to take control of my own affairs. The problem is that Eric has been using his position to benefit his own company. Nothing illegal, you understand, but ethically questionable. If I divorce him now, he'll likely try to claim that he's entitled to compensation for his work on my behalf. I was beginning to see where this was going. But if he leaves you for another woman, then he's the one abandoning the marriage. It changes the power dynamic considerably. She turned back to me, and her smile was genuinely warm for the first time since I'd arrived. I understand your wife is expecting Eric to support her financially after their respective divorces are finalized. That seems to be her assumption. Poor thing. She's going to be very disappointed. Marissa returned to her chair and picked up her tea glass. Foster, I have a proposition for you. I'm listening. Help me document Eric's affair, and I'll make sure your divorce goes as smoothly as possible. I have resources that could be very useful. Private investigators, forensic accountants, attorneys who specialize in complex asset division. What kind of documentation are you looking for? Photos, videos, financial records showing money he's spent on your wife, communications between them, anything that establishes a clear pattern of adultery and financial impropriety. I considered her offer. Marissa Duncan was offering me access to the kind of professional help that would normally cost 6 figures, all in exchange for helping her gather evidence that would protect her own interests. There's one thing I don't understand, I said. If you've been planning to divorce Eric for 2 years, why haven't you done it already? Marissa's expression hardened. Because I wanted to make sure he lost everything when I did it. Eric has been living off my family's money for 10 years, using my connections to build his business, trading on my name to get clients. He's convinced himself that he's some kind of real estate genius, but the truth is that without my backing, he's nothing. And now I'm going to prove it. When I'm finished with Eric Duncan, he won't be able to get a job selling timeshares in Orlando. She leaned forward, her ice blue eyes intense. The question is, Mr. Foster, are you interested in watching your wife discover what it's like to be with a man who can't afford to keep her in the style she's become accustomed to? I thought about Julia's 8-month affair, about her casual dismissal of our 12-year marriage as an arrangement, about her assumption that she deserved half of everything I'd worked to build. Mrs. Duncan, I said, I think we're going to work very well together. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of surveillance, documentation, and careful planning. Marissa's private investigator was a former FBI agent named Catherine Wells, who looked like a suburban soccer mom and had the instincts of a tracker. Together, we built a comprehensive picture of Eric and Julia's affair that would have impressed a federal prosecutor. They weren't particularly careful. Eric had been using his company credit card to pay for hotel rooms, expensive dinners, and shopping trips with Julia. He'd given her a key to a condo he owned downtown, supposedly for business meetings. They exchanged dozens of text messages every day, many of them explicit enough to make a sailor blush. But the real goldmine was Eric's financial records. Catherine's forensic accountant discovered that Eric had been systematically inflating his fees for managing Marissa's properties, skimming money that should have gone to his wife's accounts. Over 5 years, he'd diverted nearly $3 million to his own company. It's not technically theft, Catherine explained during one of our strategy meetings at Marissa's house. He had legitimate authority to make those decisions, but it's a clear breach of fiduciary duty, and it gives Marissa grounds to sue him for the money back. Plus punitive damages, Marissa added with satisfaction. What about Julia? I asked. What about her? Catherine consulted her notes. She's been receiving gifts from Eric, jewelry, clothes, that laptop he bought her, but nothing that would constitute a significant asset. Her PR business is profitable, but not spectacular. Honestly, she's more of a victim than a co-conspirator. I thought about that. Julia had always been attracted to successful men, drawn to the lifestyle that money could provide. She'd married me when I was a promising young engineer with good prospects, and she'd stayed married as long as those prospects continued to improve. But she'd never been particularly interested in how the money was made, only in how it was spent. She's going to be in for a rude awakening, Marissa said, reading my thoughts, assuming Eric doesn't actually leave you for her. Marissa's laugh was like crystal breaking. Oh, he's going to leave me. In fact, I'm going to make it very easy for him. She outlined her plan over dinner that night. It was elegant in its simplicity and brutal in its effectiveness. First, she would confront Eric about the affair, but instead of demanding that he end it, she would suggest a trial separation. This would give him the freedom to be with Julia openly while maintaining the fiction that he was working toward a divorce. Second, she would gradually transfer control of her family's assets away from Eric's company, citing a desire to simplify her financial affairs during the separation. By the time Eric realized what was happening, he would have lost access to the majority of his income. Third, she would use the evidence Catherine had gathered to file a lawsuit against Eric's company for breach of fiduciary duty and conversion of assets. This would freeze his business accounts and make it impossible for him to access the money he'd been skimming. The beauty of it, Marissa explained, is that Eric will think he's getting everything he wants right up until the moment he realizes he's lost everything he had. What about Julia? What about her? She made her choice. Now she gets to live with the consequences. I should have felt sorry for Julia. Despite everything she'd done, we'd shared 12 years together, built a life that had been good, even if it hadn't been perfect. But every time I started to soften, I remembered the casual way she'd dismissed our marriage as an arrangement, the entitled assumption that she deserved half of everything I'd worked for. Julia had wanted a different life. She was about to get exactly that. The confrontation came on a Thursday evening in late September. I was at my office reviewing plans for a new hotel project when Rob called. It's happening, he said. Marissa just called Eric and asked him to come home. She says they need to talk. I checked my watch, 7:30. How long until he gets there? 20 minutes, maybe less. Catherine's already in position. Catherine had installed micro cameras throughout the Duncan house during one of Eric's business trips. Everything that was about to happen would be recorded in high-definition video and crystal-clear audio. What about Julia? She's at the condo, waiting for Eric to call her after his big talk with his wife. I could picture her there, probably wearing something striking and expensive that Eric had bought her, rehearsing what she would say when he told her he was finally free. She'd probably already started planning their future together, where they would live, how they would announce their relationship, what kind of wedding they would have. My phone buzzed with a text from Julia. Thinking about you tonight. I know this is hard, but everything's going to work out for the best. I stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it without responding. Nate? Rob's voice brought me back to the present. You still there? Yeah, I'm here. Eric just pulled into his driveway. Showtime. I could have gone home, could have waited for Rob to call me with the results. Instead, I drove to Sunset Cove Marina and parked where I could see the lights of the Duncan house across the water. It seemed appropriate somehow to witness the beginning of the end from a distance. My phone rang at 8:15. Catherine. It's done, she said. Eric took the bait. He's packing a suitcase right now. How did Marissa play it? Like a master. She told him she knew about the affair that she was tired of fighting to save their marriage, and that maybe they should take some time apart to figure out what they both really wanted. She even helped him pack. And Eric bought it? Completely. He actually thanked her for being so understanding, said he hoped they could still be friends. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. What happens now? Now Eric goes to his girlfriend, and Marissa starts phase 2 of the plan. The lawsuit gets filed first thing Monday morning. I hung up and sat in my car, watching the lights of the Duncan house gradually go dark. Across town, Julia was probably opening champagne, celebrating the beginning of her new life with the man she loved. She had no idea that her new life was going to be very different from what she was expecting. My phone buzzed with another text from Julia. "He did it! Eric left Marissa. We're finally going to be together." This time, I typed back, "Congratulations. I hope you'll be very happy together." And for the first time in weeks, I actually meant it. The lawsuit hit Eric Duncan like a freight train on Monday morning. By Tuesday, his business accounts were frozen. By Wednesday, the story was front-page news in the Sunset Cove Herald. Local developer sued for millions in asset diversion. I read the article over coffee at my office, savoring every detail. The reporter had done their homework. Eric's company was described as heavily dependent on contracts with Duncan family properties. And there were quotes from unnamed sources suggesting that Mr. Duncan's business practices had been under scrutiny for some time. Rob walked in as I was finishing the article. "Have you talked to Julia?" he asked. "She's called 6 times since yesterday. I haven't answered. Probably smart. Catherine says Eric's been trying to reach Marissa since the lawsuit was filed, but she's not taking his calls either." "Where are they staying?" "The downtown condo, for now. But Eric can't access his accounts to pay the mortgage, and Julia's PR income isn't going to cover a $3,000 a month rent payment." I folded the newspaper and set it aside. "How long before they figure out they're broke?" "Catherine thinks maybe 2 weeks. Eric's got some cash reserves, but not enough to maintain the lifestyle Julia's expecting." My phone rang. Julia again. This time I answered. "Nate, thank God. I've been trying to reach you for days." "I've been busy. What do you need?" "I need to know if you've seen the news about Eric's company." "I saw it. Sounds like he's having some legal troubles." "It's all lies, Nate. Marissa is trying to destroy him because she's angry about the divorce." "Is she divorcing him, I mean?" Silence on the other end of the line. "Julia, it's complicated. She's playing games, trying to make things difficult for us." "What kind of games?" "She won't sign the papers. She says she needs time to think about it, but really she's just trying to punish Eric for leaving her." I almost laughed. Marissa wasn't playing games. She was playing chess, and Eric was about to discover that he'd been in checkmate from the moment he walked out of their house. "I'm sure it will work out," I said. "These things usually do. That's what I'm calling about. I know this is awkward, but I need a favor." Here it comes, I thought. The thing is, Eric's accounts are tied up because of this lawsuit, and I'm having trouble making ends meet. I was wondering if you could help me out, just temporarily, until everything gets sorted out. "Help you out how?" "Maybe let me stay at the house for a few more weeks. And possibly, I hate to ask this, but could you help with some of my expenses? Just until Eric can access his money again?" I let the silence stretch out, imagining Julia in Eric's expensive condo, surrounded by the remnants of their celebration, slowly realizing that her knight in shining armor might not be able to afford the armor. "Nate, are you there?" "I'm here. I'm just trying to understand what you're asking me." "I'm asking my husband to help me during a difficult time." "Your husband." I repeated the words slowly. "Julia, 3 weeks ago you told me you wanted a divorce because you were in love with another man. You said our marriage was just an arrangement. Now you want me to support you financially while you're living with that other man? It's not like that. What's it like then? It's temporary. Just until Eric and Marissa work out their divorce settlement. And if they don't work it out, if Marissa decides she doesn't want a divorce after all?" Another long silence. "That won't happen." "How can you be sure?" "Because Eric loves me. We're going to be together no matter what Marissa does." I almost admired her certainty. Even with her world crumbling around her, Julia still believed in the fairy tale Eric had sold her. "Julia, I want you to listen to me very carefully. I will not give you money to support your relationship with another man. I will not let you live in my house while you're sleeping with your lover. And I will not pretend that we're still married when you've made it clear that you want to be with someone else. But I have nowhere else to go. You have Eric. Eric can't." She stopped herself, but it was too late. "Eric can't what? Support you. Pay for your expenses? Give you the lifestyle you thought you were getting when you left me for him? It's just temporary, she said again, but her voice was smaller now, uncertain. Julia, I'm going to give you some advice, and I want you to consider it carefully. You made a choice 3 weeks ago. You chose Eric over our marriage, chose the promise of a different life over the life we'd built together. That was your right, and I've accepted it. Nate, but you don't get to have it both ways. You don't get to leave me for another man, and then expect me to take care of you when that man can't. You wanted independence? This is what independence looks like. I hung up before she could respond. Rob had been listening to my side of the conversation with growing amusement. Cold, he said. Accurate, but cold. She made her bed. Literally. Rob grinned. Catherine says Eric's been trying to get a loan to cover his legal expenses, but no bank will touch him while the lawsuit is pending. How much does he need? About $2 million just to get started. His legal fees alone are going to run 6 figures. I did some quick math. Eric's company had been profitable, but most of that profit had come from managing Marissa's properties. Without that income stream and with his accounts frozen, Eric Duncan was effectively broke, which meant Julia was about to discover what it was like to be in love with a man who couldn't afford to keep her. My phone buzzed with a text from Sam. Divorce papers ready for your review. When do you want to serve them? I typed back, give it another week. I want to see how this plays out first. You're enjoying this, aren't you? Rob asked. I'm enjoying watching people get exactly what they asked for. And what did Julia ask for? I looked out my office window at the marina, where $1-million yachts bobbed peacefully in the afternoon sun. She asked for a life without me in it, I said. I'm just making sure she gets it. The final act began 2 weeks later on a Friday evening in October. I was at home, grilling dinner on my deck and enjoying the sunset, when my doorbell rang. Julia stood on my front porch looking like she'd aged 5 years in the past month. Her designer clothes were wrinkled. Her usually perfect hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and she wasn't wearing makeup. For the first time since I'd known her, she looked ordinary. Can I come in? She asked. I stepped aside and let her into the house we'd shared for 3 years. She looked around like she was seeing it for the first time. The custom millwork I'd designed, the furniture we'd picked out together, the art we'd collected during our travels. God, I'd forgotten how beautiful this place is, she said. Would you like something to drink? Wine, if you have it. I poured 2 glasses of the Pinot Grigio she'd always preferred and handed her one. She took a large sip before speaking. Eric's company filed for bankruptcy yesterday. I heard, I'm sorry. Are you? I considered the question. I'm sorry that you're hurting. I'm not sorry that your boyfriend is facing the consequences of his actions. Julia walked to the living room windows and looked out at the Gulf. The condo's being repossessed next week. Eric can't make the payments. Where will you go? I don't know. She turned back to me and I could see tears in her eyes. My PR business is falling apart. Half my clients have dropped me since the scandal broke. Apparently, being associated with Eric Duncan isn't good for business right now. What does Eric say about all this? Julia's laugh was bitter. Eric says a lot of things. He says Marissa is a vindictive witch who's trying to destroy him out of spite. He says the lawsuit is frivolous, and he'll win when it goes to trial. He says we just need to weather the storm and everything will be fine. But you don't believe him. I don't know what to believe anymore. She sat down on the couch, looking smaller and more fragile than I'd ever seen her. Nate, I made a mistake. Which mistake would that be? All of it. The affair, leaving you, believing Eric when he said he was going to take care of me. She looked up at me with desperate eyes. I want to come home. I'd been expecting this conversation for weeks, ever since Catherine had told me about Eric's financial collapse. I'd even rehearsed what I would say, how I would handle Julia's inevitable attempt to reconcile. But now that the moment was here, I felt nothing but sadness. This isn't your home anymore, Julia. It could be. We could work things out, go to counseling, start over. Start over? I sat down across from her, maintaining distance. Julia, you had an 8-month affair with your boss. You told me our marriage was just an arrangement. You left me for another man and then asked me to financially support your relationship with him. I know, and I'm sorry. You're sorry because it didn't work out the way you planned. You're sorry because Eric turned out to be a fraud who couldn't actually give you the life he promised. But are you sorry about the affair itself? Are you sorry about betraying 12 years of marriage for a fantasy? Julia was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks. Yes, I'm sorry about all of it. I made a terrible mistake, and I want to fix it. Some mistakes can't be fixed, Julia. Some choices can't be undone. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the water where I'd sat in my car the night Eric left Marissa. Do you want to know what the worst part was? I said. It wasn't the affair itself. It wasn't even the lying. It was the way you talked about our marriage, like it was some kind of business arrangement instead of 12 years of building a life together. I didn't mean it like that. Yes, you did. And you know what? Maybe you were right. Maybe that's all it ever was to you. A convenient arrangement with a man who could provide the lifestyle you wanted. I turned back to face her. But it was never an arrangement to me, Julia. It was a marriage. It was a partnership. It was a commitment I took seriously even when you didn't. I can take it seriously now. I can be the wife you deserve. No, you can't, because I don't trust you anymore, and I never will again. Every time you're late coming home, every time your phone buzzes with a text, every time you say you have to work late, I'll wonder if you're lying to me again. Julia's tears were coming faster now. So that's it? 12 years of marriage, and you're just going to throw it all away? I'm not throwing anything away. You already did that. I walked to the front door and opened it. I'll have Sam send you the divorce papers next week. They're fair. You'll get half of our joint assets, but the house and my business stay with me. You'll have enough money to get back on your feet, find a place to live, rebuild your PR business. Julia stood up slowly like an old woman. And Eric? What about him? Are you going to keep destroying him? You and Marissa. I almost laughed. Julia, I haven't destroyed Eric Duncan. He destroyed himself the moment he decided to steal from his wife and lie to his mistress. Marissa and I just made sure everyone could see what he really was. She walked past me toward the door, then stopped. I loved you, you know. Maybe not the way I should have, but I did love you. I know, I said, and I loved you too. That's what makes this so sad. Julia walked out of my house and out of my life. I watched her drive away in the BMW Eric had bought her, probably one of the last expensive things she'd owned for a while. My phone rang. Marissa. I assume you heard about the bankruptcy filing? She said. Julia just left. She told me. How are you feeling? I considered the question. Relieved, mostly. It's finally over. Not quite. Eric's going to lose everything. The company, the properties, probably the shirt off his back by the time my lawyers are finished with him. And your ex-wife is going to discover what it's like to be middle class again. She'll survive. Julia's tougher than she looks. Perhaps, but she'll never again take for granted what she had with you. I walked back out to my deck where my dinner was still warming on the grill. The sun was setting over the Gulf, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that no amount of money could buy. Marissa, I said, yes. Thank you for everything. Thank you, Nate. It's been a pleasure working with you. I hung up and stood on my deck, looking out at the water and thinking about justice, revenge, and the difference between the two. Julia and Eric had gotten exactly what they'd asked for. A life together, free from the constraints of their previous relationships. The fact that it wasn't the life they'd expected was their problem, not mine. My phone buzzed with one last text from Julia. I hope someday you can forgive me. I typed back, I already have, but that doesn't mean I'll forget. Then I blocked her number, deleted her contact information, and went inside to enjoy my dinner. For the first time in months, I was hungry.